They say the luxury hospitality industry is just high-priced babysitting for grown adults who carry black credit cards and severe god complexes. I own the Crestview Grand, a boutique luxury resort tucked along the white sands of the Florida Panhandle. We cater exclusively to wealthy clientele who demand perfection, people who can distinguish between 400 and 600 thread count Egyptian cotton sheets by touch alone, and who consider all-inclusive resorts an insult to their standing. I built this coastal fortress from the ground up. I did not inherit a single dollar, nor did I marry into money. I clawed this business out of financial ruin 6 years ago after my first marriage imploded and took my regional catering company down with it. My private office overlooks the main marble atrium through a wall of tinted glass, giving me a clear view of the front desk like a quiet hawk watching a field. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the first administrative grenade landed on my desk. My events director, Nora, walked into my office carrying a heavy leather-bound dossier. She had that very specific expression on her face. The one that usually meant a high-net-worth client was demanding live swans in the indoor pool and needed to be reminded of basic biohazard regulations. Nora dropped the folder onto my dark mahogany desk and sighed. "We have a major buyout inquiry for the Grand Ballroom over Memorial Day weekend," she said. "Full property buyout, reserve wine pairings, and the platinum catering tier. But they are demanding to bring in an outside pastry team from Miami." I did not look up from my laptop. "Denied," I said plainly. "Our executive pastry chef trained in Paris for 12 years. We do not allow outside food. Who is the client? Is it another social media influencer trying to trade promotional exposure for poached lobster?" Nora tapped the top of the file. "It is a corporate entity," she explained. "Apex Prime LLC. But the event writer specifically requests a luxury bridal suite for Miss Chloe Vance and a groom lounge for Mr. Brandon Thorpe." The air in my office evaporated instantly. My pulse did not race. It slowed down, assessing the sudden threat, then settled into the heavy, deliberate rhythm of a war drum. Chloe Vance, my ex-wife. The woman who 6 years ago decided that our joint catering business was holding her back. She quietly dissolved our limited liability company behind my back, stripped our operating capital, diverted our prime corporate client list to her new consulting venture, and left me holding over $200,000 in joint debt. She did not just walk away from our marriage. She wiped out my life savings and left me to face bankruptcy court alone while she launched her high-end corporate advisory firm. "Grant," Nora asked, stepping closer to my desk. "You look pale. Do you know these people?" I took a slow sip of my black coffee and adjusted my tie. "I know the corporate entity," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "Apex Prime LLC is a shell company. Chloe uses it whenever she wants to process personal expenses through corporate accounts to avoid close scrutiny from tax auditors or business partners." I opened the dossier and scanned the contract terms. The audacity was astounding. Chloe was booking my flagship hotel for her lavish wedding to her new fiancé. When Chloe left me 6 years ago, I was completely broke. I lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment that smelled of stale grease and damp concrete. She took the high road of public narrative, claiming she was the visionary who escaped a failing business partner. I moved 2 hours south, took back my mother's maiden name of Montgomery, reclaimed my financial independence, and spent 6 brutal years building the Crestview Grand into the premier oceanfront resort in the state. I built it specifically to represent everything Chloe thought I could never achieve, and now she was booking it. Did she know I owned it? I carefully examined the reservation paperwork. The contact email belonged to a third-party event agency in Miami. The primary signatory listed on the deposit wire was a corporate treasurer. Chloe had no idea. She thought the Crestview Grand was just another anonymous, high-end venue managed by an unseen corporate board. She did not know that Grant Montgomery, the resort founder and sole owner, was the man she'd abandoned 6 years earlier under the name Grant Vance. Nora leaned over the desk. "Should I decline the booking? We are technically near capacity, but I can reallocate staff if the revenue justifies it. However, if this is personal, we can turn them down immediately." "No," I said, standing up and walking over to the floor-to-ceiling glass window. Down in the courtyard, bellhops were loading leather luggage into a silver sedan. The entire machinery of my hotel was humming perfectly. If we decline, they will simply take their business down the street to a competing resort. She will have her perfect day, toast her new life, and never realize how close she came to the edge of a cliff. I looked at the contract again. The non-refundable deposit was enormous, totaling $75,000 on a $150,000 booking, and embedded deep within the venue regulations. Rules I had personally drafted 3 years ago during late-night legal reviews was Clause 14b. Clause 14b stated explicitly that if a booking entity misrepresents the true nature of an event, uses a commercial shell organization to obscure personal usage for fraudulent tax write-offs, or fails to disclose the primary beneficiaries, the venue retains the absolute legal right to terminate the event immediately without refund. Approve the reservation, Nora, I instructed softly. Send them our premium welcome package, the one with the imported champagne and truffle oil. Nora looked uncertain. Are you entirely sure, Grant? You seem focused, but this feels risky. I am completely sure, I said. Chloe Vance is coming to my home. She is bringing her 32-year-old fiancé, Brandon Thorpe, to celebrate their union on my Italian marble floors, under my custom crystal chandeliers, drinking my reserve wine. I sat back at my desk and picked up my pen. I signed the approval line with a steady hand. One last detail, Nora, I added as she reached the door. List me on their internal paperwork only as the lead operations consultant. Do not put my owner title or full name on any guest-facing documents. If anyone asks, I am simply overseeing physical logistics. Nora nodded slowly. Understood. Operations consultant. I looked back out toward the ocean. Dark storm clouds were gathering over the Gulf. The local weather channel called it a tropical disturbance. I considered it the perfect background atmosphere. Chloe thought she was booking a luxury venue for her dream wedding. What she had actually booked was a front-row seat to her own public undoing. And the best part was that she was paying me $150,000 for the privilege. 2 weeks later, the happy couple arrived for their formal venue walkthrough. I made sure I was nowhere near the main reception desk when their limousine pulled up to the covered portico. Instead, I positioned myself inside the empty grand ballroom wearing the standard operational uniform of our senior service staff. A tailored black button-down shirt, dark slacks, and a simple brass name tag that read Grant Operations. No executive titles, no gold lapel pins. Just another face in the service machinery of a 5-star hotel. I held a wooden clipboard and pretended to inspect the wall sconces as the heavy double doors swung open. Chloe stepped into the ballroom first. At 48 years old, she looked impeccably styled, wearing a sharply tailored ivory blazer and expensive designer heels. She carried herself with the familiar, razor-sharp arrogance that had defined our marriage. She was on her phone, barking orders to a junior associate about corporate quarterly projections. Right behind her came Brandon Thorpe. Brandon was 32 years old, built like a gym instructor, and radiating the obnoxious energy of a man who had recently acquired access to money he had not earned. He was wearing dark designer sunglasses indoors, inside a windowless ballroom, and twirling a set of sports car keys around his finger. It is much smaller than the promotional photos suggested, Brandon announced loudly, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. He did not look at the hand-painted ceiling murals or the gold leaf detailing. He evaluated the space purely as a backdrop for his own social media presence. Nora, who was leading the walkthrough, maintained a flawless professional smile. Actually, Mr. Thorpe, this ballroom comfortably accommodates 400 guests for formal dining. For your party of 200, it will provide an exceptionally spacious layout. I do not want spacious, Brandon snapped, pulling off his sunglasses to reveal cold, impatient eyes. I want exclusive. I want intimacy that looks expensive. Chloe, tell your corporate team to stop calling me about the Q3 budget while we are inspecting wedding venues. Chloe lowered her phone, looking mildly annoyed. Brandon, those investors are funding the merger. Just let me handle the calls while we check the staging. Nora gestured toward where I was standing near the service doors. And this is Grant from our senior operations team. He will be overseeing the physical staging and service flow to ensure your layout matches your precise expectations. Chloe's eyes swept over me. This was the moment of truth. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of living under the same roof, sharing meals and building a business together. Her gaze slid right past my face without a single flicker of recognition. I had cut my hair short, let gray touch my temples, and put on dark reading glasses. But more than that, wealthy people like Chloe and Brandon simply do not see service personnel. To them, a man in a black button-down holding a clipboard is part of the wall molding. Her total blindness to my presence was insulting, but it provided me with total tactical advantage. Brandon walked over to me, looking impatient. "Listen, Grant, or whatever your name is. I want the head table elevated on a custom riser. I want to be looking down at the guests when we sit for dinner. Can your team build that by Saturday?" "We can certainly construct a raised stage platform, sir," I replied, keeping my voice flat, low, and entirely devoid of the authority I usually command as hotel owner. "Good," Brandon said. "And these draperies," he added, tugging disrespectfully at the custom velvet curtains I had imported from Venice. "They look heavy and outdated. Replace them with sheer white linen." "Those curtains serve an acoustic purpose, sir," I noted calmly. "They prevent audio reflection for live musical performances. Removing them will degrade the sound quality for your band." Brandon stared at me as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken out of turn. "Did I ask for a lecture on sound engineering?" he sneered. "I gave you an instruction. Cover them up or take them down." "Whatever you want, babe," Chloe interrupted, not even looking up from her tablet screen. "Just tell the staff what to alter and let us sign the paperwork." Brandon turned away from me and walked over to one of my young banquet captains, a hard-working 22-year-old named Matteo who was setting up a sample table arrangement. "Excuse me," Brandon barked at the young man. "Why is there a separate salad fork on this setting?" "It looks cluttered." Matteo politely bowed his head. "Sir, it is standard etiquette for a 5-course tasting menu. The outer fork is designated for the initial greens." "It looks messy," Brandon said. He picked up the heavy fine silver fork, custom silver that cost $90 apiece, and casually dropped it onto the hardwood floor with a loud clang. "Take it away. We will use one fork for the salad and the main course. Simplify it." Matteo flushed with embarrassment, bending down immediately to retrieve the silver. I felt a surge of cold fury tighten in my chest. This was no longer about venue logistics or past marital grievances. This was about basic human dignity. A wealthy client treating a young worker like trash simply because he felt entitled by a credit card. "Actually, sir," I stepped forward, keeping my expression entirely neutral. "Our culinary service standards require appropriate flatware for each course. Removing required utensils creates confusion for our service staff and delays the kitchen timing." Brandon whipped around, his face reddening. "I do not care about your kitchen timing," he hissed. "You are here to move tables and carry trays, not to give me advice on dining aesthetics. Is that clear?" "Of course, Mr. Thorpe," I said softly. My voice was smooth, cool, and entirely unbothered. "We will adjust according to your written specifications." I watched them walk out 20 minutes later. Brandon was complaining about the parking arrangement, while Chloe trailed behind him, already back on her corporate call. They were a disaster of entitlement and insecurity. As soon as the double doors closed, Nora walked over to me, her hands shaking slightly with anger. "I despise them," she whispered. "I genuinely despise both of them. Can we charge them an administrative misconduct fee?" "Oh, we are going to do much better than that," I said. I handed her my clipboard and pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed my chief legal counsel, Roland Pierce, whose law firm occupied the office suite on the second floor of our commercial wing. "Roland," I said into the phone as I walked back toward my private elevator. "Pull the complete file on Apex Prime LLC. I want a full review of our venue exclusivity terms, specifically the provisions regarding corporate misrepresentation, commercial rate fraud, and staff protection." "What are you planning, Grant?" Roland asked over the line. "I am planning to enforce our standards," I replied. "Let us see how far these two are willing to push before the trap springs shut." By the time Memorial Day weekend arrived, the coastal heat was thick and heavy over the Atlantic. Inside the Crestview Grand, the grand ballroom had been transformed into an extravagant display of wealth. $50,000 worth of white orchids hung from the coffered ceilings, illuminated by warm amber spotlighting. A 12-piece swing band from Atlanta was testing their sound system, playing low jazz arrangements near the mahogany bar. I stood near the mezzanine balcony overlooking the ballroom floor, wearing a sharp charcoal suit. I looked like an understated high-level guest or a discreet private manager. In my hand, I held a glass of sparkling water. Down below, 200 well-dressed guests were mingling, sipping $50 glasses of champagne. Chloe looked glamorous in a silver designer gown, holding court near a massive ice sculpture shaped like an anchor. She was laughing loudly, holding a glass of wine, clearly enjoying the perception of ultimate success. Brandon was moving around the room like a peacock, boasting to a group of corporate executives about his upcoming investment fund. He was already visibly intoxicated by 7 in the evening. I checked my watch. 7:15. Dinner service was about to commence. High-end service in a luxury hotel is an intricate dance. Dozens of servers move in synchronized patterns, carrying heavy trays, coordinating course timing with precision. One minor mistake can disrupt an entire dining room. Because 2 of our banquet servers had called in sick with a sudden fever, one of our senior housekeepers, a gentle 54-year-old woman named Elena, who had worked with me since the day I opened the hotel, volunteered to assist the service team by clearing empty glassware. Elena was carrying a heavy silver tray loaded with used champagne flutes, navigating carefully through the crowded floor. Brandon turned around suddenly, waving his arms wide as he gestured during a story, and nearly collided with Elena. Elena froze instantly, balancing the heavy tray with expert skill. Not a single cliss spilled. "Pardon me, sir," Elena said softly, stepping back respectfully. Brandon looked down at his sleeve. There was not a single drop of liquid on his suit, but he reacted as if he had been physically assaulted. "Watch where you are stepping," Brandon shouted, his sharp voice cutting through the live band music. "You nearly ruined a $4,000 custom suit with your carelessness." "I am very sorry, sir," Elena replied quietly, keeping her head bowed. "Do not be sorry, be competent!" Brandon snapped loudly. "The help is everywhere tonight. It is like an infestation of servants." Several nearby guests glanced over, looking uncomfortable, but no one said a word. I stood on the balcony, my grip tightening on the brass railing until my knuckles turned white. A cold, absolute clarity settled over me. This was no longer just a personal reckoning over past financial betrayal. Chloe and her arrogant fiancé had brought their toxic entitlement into my home, insulting people who worked tirelessly to earn an honest living. I walked down the private access stairs and entered the ballroom floor. I moved quietly toward a corner table where several of Chloe's corporate partners were seated. An empty chair was available near the edge of the table. I sat down casually, pretending to check an operational checklist on my phone while blending into the background. A server passed by carrying a tray of past hors d'oeuvres, miniature prime beef Wellingtons prepared by Chef Henry. I reached out, selected one piece, and placed it on a small cocktail napkin to test for quality control before the main plated service. At that exact moment, Brandon walked past the table, heading toward the head table riser. He spotted me. He did not recognize me as the hotel owner, nor did he remember me as the operations man from 2 weeks earlier. All he saw was a man in a dark suit sitting at a guest table, eating a piece of food. To his mind, I was simply an employee taking an unauthorized break. Brandon marched directly over to my table, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. "Excuse me," Brandon barked, his voice carrying across the entire section of the room. I looked up slowly, chewing calmly. "Yes?" Without hesitation, Brandon reached down and violently snatched the napkin and food straight out of my hand. "Staff, eat in the kitchen." Brandon yelled loudly enough for 30 surrounding guests to hear clearly. "Know your place and get out of the dining area." The entire corner of the ballroom fell dead silent. Chloe's corporate associates looked stunned and embarrassed. Chloe herself, standing 15 feet away near the head table, turned her head briefly, saw Brandon making a scene with a man she assumed was a manager, and dismissively waved her hand before walking away. I sat motionless for 3 full seconds. In those 3 seconds, I remembered everything. I remembered sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor of a damp apartment 6 years ago. I remembered working 18-hour days cleaning toilets and scrubbing grease traps because I could not afford a cleaning crew. I remembered building this resort brick by brick, creating a workplace where employees were treated with dignity, respect, and fair wages. And now, this arrogant young man had just grabbed food from my hand and told me to eat in the kitchen. I did not raise my voice. I did not drop my dignity. I stood up slowly, smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit, and carefully placed my fabric napkin on the mahogany table. I looked Brandon directly in his eyes. He smirked, believing he had asserted his dominance over a hotel worker. "Very well, Mr. Thorpe," I said softly. I turned and walked toward the service doors. As I passed Nora, who was standing near the wall with wide, horrified eyes having witnessed the entire interaction, I stopped. "Nora," I said in a calm, measured tone, "initiate Protocol 0 immediately." "Zero?" Nora whispered, her voice trembling. "But Grant, that is reserved for structural emergencies or severe safety violations." "This is a severe violation," I replied. "Shut down the entire event." I pushed through the heavy double-swinging doors into the main resort kitchen. The room was a whirlwind of heat, noise, and intensity. Flame jets roared under stainless steel ranges, and 30 kitchen staff members were moving frantically to plate 200 portions of pan-seared Chilean sea bass. Chef Henry, our imposing executive chef, was shouting timing cues at the line cooks. "Everyone stop," I announced. My voice was not a scream, but it carried a quiet, undeniable weight that instantly cut through the kitchen noise. Line cooks paused mid-motion. Dishwashers stopped their spray hoses. Chef Henry turned around, holding a plating spoon. "Grant?" Henry asked, looking confused. "We are 5 minutes away from pushing the main course." "Turn off the ranges," I instructed. "Extinguish the ovens. Set down your utensils. Culinary service for the grand ballroom is terminated for the night." Henry stared at me in complete disbelief. "Terminated? Grant, that is a $150,000 buyout. The sea base is already cooked." "Mr. Thorpe just informed me that staff eat in the kitchen," I said, walking over to the walk-in refrigeration unit. "So tonight my staff will eat the sea base in the kitchen." I retrieved a bottle of vintage French champagne from the reserve rack, popped the cork with a crisp pop, and took a drink directly from the bottle. "Every member of this team is getting paid for their full shift," I announced to the room, plus a $500 hazard bonus for enduring verbal harassment from abusive clients. "Pack up your stations. We are closing the grand ballroom effective immediately." A stunned silence fell over the kitchen, followed quickly by quiet smiles and nods of deep appreciation. The kitchen staff had been dealing with Brandon's arrogant demands and Chloe's aggressive assistance for 3 days. I left the kitchen and took the private elevator straight up to my third-floor executive suite. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the resort's automated building management system. The Crestview Grand is a state-of-the-art smart property. From my central console, I control climate systems, electronic access doors, perimeter lighting, and audio networks. I called Security Chief Mike over our encrypted radio channel. "Mike," I said calmly, "we are executing an immediate property eviction for the Grand Ballroom. I need 4 security officers posted at the main lobby exits. Suspend valet return operations immediately. Park all client vehicles along the lower driveway, bring the key sets to the front desk, and prepare for guest departure." "Key that." "Grant," Mike replied over the radio. "Are we dealing with hostile individuals?" "Passive-aggressive," I corrected, "but treat it as a high-risk ejection. Give them 30 minutes to clear the floor once notice is served." I opened the climate control application on my primary monitor. Grand Ballroom main HVAC zone. Current ambient temperature, 71 degrees. I adjusted the target set point to 84 degrees and hit confirm. It was late May in coastal Florida. Without active air conditioning, an enclosed ballroom packed with 200 people in formal attire would transform into a sweltering greenhouse within 20 minutes. Next, I accessed the digital sound matrix feeding the DJ booth in the ballroom. I sent an instant override command to cut the master microphone feed entirely, displaying a simulated system maintenance warning on the DJ console screen. Down on my security camera monitors, I watched the scene unfold. The live swing band suddenly lost microphone power mid-song. The lead singer tapped the mic in frustration, but no sound emerged. At the head table, Brandon was standing up, waving his arms angrily, demanding to know why his main course had not arrived. Chloe was fanning herself with a velvet menu card as the temperature inside the room began to climb rapidly. Guests were unbuttoning their tuxedos and whispering to one another in confusion. Nora stepped into the ballroom through the service entrance. She walked directly up to the head table, carrying an official document folder. She leaned in and spoke quietly to Brandon and Chloe. I watched through the high-definition camera feed as Brandon's face twisted into rage. He pointed aggressively toward the kitchen doors, then threw his linen napkin onto his chair. Nora pointed toward the outdoor Jasmine courtyard, informing them that the resort proprietor was waiting to address their contract status in person. Brandon grabbed his suit jacket, shoved his chair back, and marched angrily toward the courtyard exit, with Chloe following closely behind him. I stood up from my desk, straightened my jacket, and picked up the printed legal termination notice prepared by attorney Roland Pierce. It was time to meet my guests. The Jasmine courtyard was a quiet, stone-paved garden enclosed by high archways, jasmine vines, and gaslit lanterns. The cool night sea breeze washed over the stone fountain as I stepped out from the covered corridor. The heavy wooden doors banged open, and Brandon came charging into the courtyard, his tie pulled loose, his face red with sweat and irritation. Chloe was right behind him, fanning herself with an envelope. "Where is the general manager?" Brandon roared at the empty garden. "Where is the owner of this pathetic excuse for a hotel?" I stepped out from the shadow of the jasmine archway and stood by the marble fountain. "Good evening, Mr. Thorpe," I said calmly. Brandon stopped in his tracks, squinting through the dim lantern light. "You?" he yelled, stepping forward aggressively. "You are the staff member from the dining room. What are you doing out here? Did you turn off the air conditioning? I want the owner out here right now." Chloe stepped up beside him, her heels clicking loudly on the stone. She looked impatient and furious. "This is an absolute embarrassment. The temperature in that room is 85 degrees, my guests are sweating, and there is no food. Who is in charge of this facility?" I stepped into the full light of the gas lantern, folding my arms across my chest. "I am in charge, Chloe," I said quietly. Chloe froze. Her voice cut off mid-sentence. She stared at my face. For 6 years, she had assumed I was ruined, bankrupt, and forgotten in some small-town apartment. Now, standing under the lanterns of a $50 million luxury resort, she looked at me as if she were seeing a ghost. "Grant?" she whispered, her voice dropping an octave. "Grant?" Brandon repeated, looking back and forth between us in confusion. "Who the hell is Grant? Is this your ex-husband?" "Hello, Chloe," I said smoothly. "Welcome to the Crestview Grand." Chloe's eyes darted around the courtyard, taking in the manicured gardens, the luxury stone architecture, and the discreet security guards standing near the perimeter doors. You own this place?" Chloe stammered, her composure crumbling entirely. "Every single brick," I replied. "Every chandelier, every acre of land, and every event contract executed on this property." Brandon stepped forward, trying to reassert control. "Okay, look, I do not care what history you two have. We paid $150,000 for this venue. You cannot just turn off the AC and stop food service because of some personal grudge." "This is not a personal grudge, Mr. Thorpe," I said coldly. "This is strict enforcement of commercial law and venue regulations." I pulled the official termination document from my jacket. "First, under Clause 14B of your signed venue agreement, your reservation was booked under Apex Prime LLC as a corporate retreat to fraudulently claim business tax deductions for a personal wedding. That constitutes commercial misrepresentation and material breach of contract. Second," I continued, "under Clause 7 of our property terms and Florida statutes, Chapter 509, Section 141, the management retains the absolute legal right to eject any individuals who engage in verbal abuse, harassment, or disorderly conduct toward hotel personnel. You physically grabbed food from my hand, referred to my staff as an infestation of servants, and created a hostile environment. Your deposit of $75,000 is forfeited under liquidated damages provisions," I stated plainly. "Your event is officially canceled, and you have exactly 15 minutes to clear your guests from the property before local law enforcement executes a formal trespass removal." "Trespass removal?" Brandon shrieked, his voice cracking. "We are paying clients." "You were clients," I corrected. "Now you are trespassers." Chloe turned on Brandon, her face turning purple with rage. "You idiot!" she screamed at him. "You talked to him like he was a servant. You snatched a plate out of his hand? How was I supposed to know he owned the hotel?" Brandon shouted back, waving his arms wildly. "He was sitting there in a plain suit eating hors d'oeuvre. Why didn't you tell me your ex-husband owned the top resort in the state?" "Because I didn't know," Chloe screamed, shoving Brandon's chest. "You brought me to my ex-husband's resort for our wedding. This is going to be all over the corporate news." "It gets worse," I added dryly. "Several of your guests have already filmed the main ballroom shutdown. Right on cue, 2 uniformed officers from the local sheriff's department stepped into the courtyard, escorted by Security Chief Mike. "Evening, Mr. Montgomery," Officer Miller said politely, nodding to me. "We received your dispatch regarding an event, termination, and property clearance." "Officer!" Chloe pleaded, stepping toward them. "This man is sabotaging my wedding out of spite." "Ma'am," Officer Miller replied sternly, "Mr. Montgomery is the legal property owner. If he revokes your venue license, you must vacate immediately. If you refuse, we will process you for criminal trespass." Brandon looked around in absolute panic. His luxury wedding was ruined, his corporate image was shattered, and his powerful fiancée was screaming at him in front of police officers. 10 minutes remaining, I noted, checking my watch. "I suggest you call an Uber. Valet services have been suspended for safety compliance." Chloe let out a scream of pure frustration, grabbed her heavy dress train, and marched out toward the front gates, leaving Brandon to haul 4 heavy designer suitcases down the long driveway by himself. I watched them go from the front portico. Down at the main entrance, a popular lifestyle influencer who was among their guests was live streaming the entire meltdown to 300,000 viewers online. As the police cruiser escorted Chloe and Brandon off the property grounds, Nora walked up beside me, handing me a glass of iced water. "That was incredible, Grant," she said softly. "It was simply business," I replied, taking a sip. By the next morning, the story had gone viral across major media platforms. Millions of people watched the video of the arrogant groom being evicted from a luxury resort after telling the secret owner to eat in the kitchen. The Crestview Grand received over 2,000 new booking inquiries within 48 hours, establishing our brand as an unyielding fortress of quality, dignity, and standards. I sat on my private office balcony, enjoying the morning sun reflecting off the ocean, eating a quiet breakfast prepared by Chef Henry. I had built my empire on respect, hard work, and honor, and no amount of arrogant money would ever change that.